So a couple of things my dad did, and he loved telling stories. He was really good and very animated when he told these stories. He'd laugh and he'd use his hands and his body, and you know, something a lot of people knew. But in our church that we grew up in, my dad was the bus driver. It's interesting. We had a mini bus for the church, and my dad would every Sunday morning go before church, get the bus, and then he would drive and go pick up all the older people that couldn't drive anymore. He'll pick them up, bring them back, bring them to church, escort them into church, and then after church, collect all the old people in the bus, take them back or drop them off, then go drop the bus. And so we would go with him, drop the old people or pick them up, and they had stories. They always had stories to tell, and his nickname was Bokkie. And I asked him about that because he was Louis Eusebius the sixth. My grandfather was the fifth, and his father was the fourth, and they all lived in the same house when my dad was born. So what happened was, my grandfather was Louis, my grandfather's father was Pa, which is dad, and then my dad became, instead of Louis Jr., they just called him Bokkie, which is a little antelope, a little, like a deer. It's not a word for a big strong man. It's just a Bokkie. It's just like, oh dear, hey dear. If you think about it that way. Anyways, it was just what people called him. Everybody knew him as Bokkie. And he went to high school, Hercules High School. Don't know what elementary school he went to. No idea. But he grew up in Pretoria, and with my grandmother and grandfather. I know he loved his army. He was a military police, and my brother will tell a lot of his stories. And here's an interesting story. He told this one, and this was pretty scary. I remember there was this guy that was notorious for AWOL, and my dad busted him a couple times. And one day they got a phone call at the police office, where my dad worked. They said, it was this guy. He said, I'm on AWOL. I'm tired. I want to give myself up, but I'll only give myself up to Louis. Louis has to come get me. So my dad's like, okay, fine. That's the address. So he jumped in the car and he drove over there. And as soon as he pulled into the gate of the property, a bullet came through the window. And then it just kept coming. My dad's like, and he ducked, and he turned the car sideways, and he got out the door, the passenger door, I think. And he rolled around and he went around the house. And all the while my dad's going around the house, there's bullets, hitting the car. Boom, my dad can hear the shots. And so he told me how he told the story, and he told us how he went through the back door into the house, and he had his pistol drawn. And when he came into the room, the guy was still laying at the window shooting. He did not expect anybody to be behind him. My dad got in and whipped him with a pistol, but he was so full of adrenaline, he folded the guy's arms underneath him and sat on him, and he radioed in for help. And he was just so full of adrenaline, because that's a near-death experience, Sure, I remember this story. He had a lot of empty stories, My brother told, I think he told the one of when my dad escorted the president of South Africa, and he was the only guy clearing the road, stopping traffic, because the president's car can't stop. It has to keep moving, for security and safety purposes. So he was the only guy going through intersections, stopping cars, and how he kicked the Volkswagen Beetle that was in the way because he was making a turn and he couldn't turn sharp enough. So he kind of pushed himself and the bike away from the car, but he left a big dent in the car. Stuff like that. And then he, when they did inspections, and he had a reputation for, people were scared to wake him, because when he was still in military school, their sergeant would yell and wake them up. And my dad actually told me this. He's like, this one day he was sleeping, and by the time he realized, it was too late. Was it the sergeant? I think it's the sergeant. Was already in the barracks, and he was doing the inspection, and everybody was standing, and my dad was still in bed. So what happened was my dad just laid there and he faked sleeping. Like, I'm not moving, I'm sleeping like I didn't even hear this. He said, so the next thing, he doesn't know what happened to the sergeant, but the sergeant decided to jump on my dad's bed, which gave my dad a fright. And his reaction, he just punched him. He just punched the sergeant. He said he knocked the guy out. What started off as just like, oh dang, I'm busted. Now this guy jumped on his bed and he got such a fright. He turned and he punched him, boom, and he knocked him out. So they woke him up and everything. He said from then on, everybody, when my dad became a sergeant, they would wake him with a broomstick. They'll say, Sergeant, Sergeant, they'll poke at his bed and he'll wake up. Crazy stuff.